Welcome to Canvatorium on Apple Vision Pro. So the first 21 labs I did in this series I made in the simulator because I didn't have the device yet. But I've had it for a couple of weeks and I figured I would just go through all the labs that I made in the simulator and see what they look like in the device. So we're just going to go through labs 1 through 21 essentially. I did 4 more today on some gestures. Posted a separate article about those. Go check that out. All right, let's dive in starting at lab 1. So at the very beginning, I'm just exploring windows, volumes, and immersive spaces. So in this case, just opening a window. I've got a 2D window with a 3D model in it. You can see the 3D object kind of sticking out from the surface of the 2D window, but it is in fact a 2D window. It's not a volume. And next one is essentially the same thing, but in a volume this time with no window. So we just have the sphere itself. Again, nothing particularly fancy. And let's close that. Lab number 3, this time entering an immersive space. So leaving the shared space, instead of a window or volume, if I had any other windows open, those would be closed now. I would just be my app would have full control of the rendering. The gotcha with this one is that this is positioned relative to the player or the user, and that scene, basically the 000 origin of that scene is wherever the user was at the time that the immersive space was instantiated. So good to keep in mind. We don't really have control over that. Let's go lab 4. Shadow and hover effect on a 2D object. So this is a good example of something that looked great in the simulator. It looks pretty good from where I'm standing now. This is just a rectangle with a shadow on it. But as soon as you walk up close to it, I'm not sure if the video is picking this up, but it doesn't look so great. It's better to use real 3D depth effects rather than these kind of fake 2D shadows. You can definitely combine the 2D shadows with some real depth, but this doesn't look great. And let's animate Z offset for 2D views. So a couple of rectangles stacked on top of each other. If I look around now, they are all just flat on the surface of the window. If I click show depth, they animate their offsets one on top of another. And animate offset with a rotation effect. So pretty much the same things last time, only instead of stacked, they're in a row this time, and we can animate their offset along with a rotation and get this kind of curved pattern, more like 3D panels in space. Something I do a lot in Babylon.js. Using view offset to explore window bounds. So this is before I figured out how to find the bounds of a window in the simulator. This lab didn't need to exist if I had learned that earlier. But essentially I can use these sliders to figure out where exactly my object will be clipped. And on the X and Y, it's going to be, actually it's on the X and Y. Where is my Y axis? Why can I not grab that? Apparently I cannot grab the Y axis. Maybe there it is. Yeah, the X and Y is going to be basically defined by the shape of the window, and the Z axis is, from what I can tell, determined by Swift UI in Reality Kit, or the default window size. I'm not really sure. And ornament and attachment anchor. Let's open a window. So just playing with attachments, or actually not attachments, ornaments. I get those two phrases mixed up a lot. Ornaments are on 2D windows, attachments are 2D windows attached to 3D objects in a Reality Kit view. Just playing with the positioning of these that Swift UI gives us. Pretty cool. Animate offset with rotation effect in a volume this time. So similar to the lab I showed you earlier, only this time we got rid of the window and we have the cards in a volume. We could theoretically have as many as we want, and maybe multiple layers of them. Nope, we already did this. I was just playing with profile cards with some placeholder content, so just a 2D card. This actually isn't a window. For some reason I did this in a volume. I think I was playing with many of them at the time, but just playing with the placeholder modifier in SwiftUI. Pretty handy little trick. And loading a scene from Reality Composer Pro. So I'm done with the primitives for now, and I need to start loading some models. So I'm going to pop into an immersive space, load a model. I've got a particle emitter that just plays continuously. It is positioned again relative to the player at the time of instantiation. And extending the last lab with a skybox. So now we've gone into a full immersive space. I'm just floating out in space all by myself, except for this cute little rocket and an application window. A simple attachment. Again, in an immersive space, let me kind of position this a bit better. So I just have a sphere with a SwiftUI view, in this case just a rectangle with a background color and some text. And it's just floating above the attachment. It is positioned kind of arbitrarily, just where I put it. But just kind of feeling out how attachments work in SwiftUI and RealityKit. So attaching UI to a mesh. This one is pretty cool. So I've got a 3D object with basically a copy of the main window from the application. It's sent into the reality view as an attachment and then just rotated and positioned on the surface of this thing. They're not actually attached to each other. If I were to translate this object, that's not going to come with it. I would have to move that as well. But it is fully interactive. I can scroll it, I can navigate to things. I can't open labs from there, because I don't want to rip a hole in the time-space continuum, because I'm already inside one of those. But yeah, pretty cool thing to do. And select an entity from a scene on tap. So I've got a couple of different objects. I've got an attachment that says tap something. I can tap the cube, I can tap the sphere, I can tap the cone, sphere, cube. Don't have any kind of hover effect on those, so you can't really tell what I'm looking at, but just exploring some basic interaction. Moving the world instead of the player. So this was, I was kind of experimenting with a potential, kind of a very rudimentary teleportation system. So I can't move the player in RealityKit, but I can move the world. So in this case, when I point and look at one of these and tap, I'm going to move to the center of one of these boxes, but I'm not really, I'm just going to move the world instead. So I can kind of quickly move around the world, and you can see my window is staying in the same place. The 3D content is moving, but the player and the 2D content is not. So just kind of a compromised teleportation system. Glass ornaments and materials. I think I was just trying to help somebody with a YouTube question on this one. We didn't quite get the effect that they were looking for, but just playing with the different materials, the thin material versus the thick material with the glass hover effect. And a scene scaled to fit. So at this point I've got basically a scene, a RealityKit view that will size itself based on the window or by the volume size. The caveat with this one is I'm not taking into consideration any changes in display size. So if the user goes into settings and changes their display size, this doesn't change, and you will start to see it clip from the bottom and then maybe from the top based on whatever they have selected. So, but I do have a sphere here. I don't know if you can make it out in the video, but it's the same skybox that we had in that immersive space earlier, only this time shrunken down into a sphere and drawn on the interior. And because there's backspace culling, I can look into it from every angle. This is like the oldest trick in the book in VR rendering, but it is always satisfying, and it's a great way to kind of wow newcomers. All right, drag gesture. So that basically the exact same scene as last time. Now I can look and drag the spaceship around, and whenever I'm dragging it, we just switch to a different particle emitter and show more of a booster versus more of a cruising speed. Fun little toy app. And the last one from the initial simulator pass, mixing 2D views and reality views. So this is an example of some 3D objects and a 2D view, but that is not passed in as an attachment. I actually have a Z stack that has a regular Swift UI view and the reality kit in front of it, and I can put more Swift UI content around it or above it. I can use Z stacks and H stacks and V stacks to position those things around, so they don't have to be worked into the scene that way. This has some caveats with it as well, and I'll be detailing those more in the future. So yeah, that's it. Labs 1 through 21, the Canvatorium Visio series. Most of those were made in January, a little bit in December, but mostly in January, leading up to the launch of Apple Vision Pro. And now that I have the headset, this type of development should be a lot quicker and a lot easier to figure out as we go. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think.